I think every time I filmed a video, I've had a different haircut. So, for those who don't know, Spirited is a Christmas movie released this year on Apple TV starring Will Ferrell and Ryan Reynolds, and it is amazing. I watched this with my family and it just instantly went to my top three Christmas movies, beaten only by Rudolph and in really tiny parentheses all of the Claymations and A Muppet Christmas Carol. It isn't a direct sequel in the sense that, Christmas Carol ends and this movie immediately picks up where it left off, but instead takes place several hundred years later. I liked this movie so much that I was just compelled to talk about it, so come along with me while I presume to know more than industry professionals and I talk about just basically general thoughts I had while watching the movie, things I liked, things I didn't like, and things that I noticed. I've organized my thoughts into some sort of reasonable semblance, so we're just gonna see how this goes. And I wrote a little summary of the movie so you all have context for my thoughts, so I'm just gonna go ahead and read through that now. So we open with a modern Scrooge at the final part of her journey with the ghost of Christmas past, not Christmas past, yet to come. Very different movie if it's past showing her grave. And she is pulled into the ground and she wakes up on Christmas Day and gives the classic "The Spirit Did It All in One Night" line, as we see that she is forever changed. And time stops and the ghosts all appear to congratulate her on being forever changed and redeemed before time restarts and she gets immediately smacked in the face with a dodgeball. In the afterlife, all of the ghosts are celebrating a job well done for this year's perp. Their prospective Scrooges are called perps. And we go into our first song, Christmas Morning Feeling. During this, Marley says to bring in the chili of positive outcome, which is just I love it. It makes me laugh every time. I have no notes. I do wonder though, is there something they have for a negative outcome? Is it chowder? I feel like it's a chowder. Chowder feels negative to me. In the middle of the song, Present slips into the Hall of the Redeemed, where we get to see, but not really see, all of the past Scrooges. One of the previous year's perps was Dolly Parton, and I just absolutely love the implication that at one point in her life, Dolly Parton was just considered one of the worst people, just absolutely cruel and evil, because Dolly Parton is known for, among other things, being incredibly kind and charitable. It's in the Hall of the Redeemed that we get Present's Lament, which is an entirely different song, but to me it just feels like a soft reprise of Christmas Morning Feeling since it's the same melody, but this is where we get introduced to a big part of our story. Present wants to be human again. Marley comes in, ending the song, and then we get to work finding next year's perp. Marley presents a hotel manager, but Present it's so hard to say Present's name over and over. Present sees Clint Briggs, who is played by Ryan Reynolds, and after watching him perform his song Bring It Back Christmas, proposes that Clint is next year's perp. Side note, the introduction of Clint has Ryan Reynolds and Will Ferrell being face to face while Ryan monologues as if Will isn't there. And I just love knowing that they had to film this in person, nose to nose, with Ryan acting as if Will isn't there. Marley rejects Clint as a perp because he's been labeled as unredeemable. When Present threatens to retire if they don't have Clint as their perp, Marley ends up calling his bluff, but finally relents when Present threatens to sing a song. Marley does not like singing, despite it being implied that all of the afterlife is singing. This starts a montage of researching Clint before we get to sometime around Christmas in Clint's office. I think it's a day or two before. In Clint's office, we see the big three are watching Clint and gathering data, and we meet Clint's brother Owen and his niece Wren. His niece isn't Owen's daughter, but their late sister's Wendy's. Late sister Wendy's. Yes. Wren wants to be her grade's class president and has gone to her uncle Clint for help because Clint is a media consultant who specializes in what I'm just going to call drama. He generates positive publicity for his clients through usually creating fake scandals or controversy. We see that a couple times in the film. Clint suggests that they dig up some sort of dirt on her opponent, a boy named Josh, and sends Kimberly over to her office to do that. Kimberly is reluctant, but she does find a deleted video of Josh when he was, I think they say he was 11, saying how much he hates working at his parents' homeless shelter on Christmas Eve. This is where we get Kimberly, who is our Bob Cratchit, but not really equivalent, and her song View From Here, where we see that she's actually really struggling with her job and desperately wants to quit. She marches over to Clint's office, fully prepared to quit after being hyped up from her song, but ultimately crumbles and hands over the video. Kimberly says that she is officially the worst person, and Present says, "No, you aren't," which causes Kimberly to suddenly see him, but none of the other ghosts are seen, implying something more between the two characters. It's now Christmas Eve, and we're in Clint's apartment when the haunting begins. And I'll be honest, I'm not a fan of how they've interpreted modern, language is hard. I'm not a fan of how they've interpreted Marley's haunting to a modern setting, but we're gonna circle back to that afterwards. Marley arrives, and we get Marley's song, Story of Your Life, and there's a bit during the song where Clint is like, wait, you're Marley like A Christmas Carol Marley in the Bill Murray's Scrooge movie? And Marley is like, yes, this is exactly like the Bill Murray movie and all the other adaptations nobody asked for. And it's just a really good joke because, yeah, nobody asked for those adaptations. And I don't mean this as a negative. I mean this in that there are so many adaptations of A Christmas Carol that every year I learn about one that I hadn't learned of before. Here are the ones that I know of. A Muppet Christmas Carol, the best one. The Jim Carrey movie, the second best one. The Patrick Stewart made-for-TV movie. Bill Murray's Scrooge. This is, wow, what a tongue twister I was not ready for. You have the black and white Alistair Sims one. The Kelsey Grammer musical. A Christmas Carol Goes Wrong. Scrooge, which, that one just came out this year, and I think Netflix, and I think it's a musical, but I have not watched that one. I even got my hair cut over a week ago, and my hairdresser told me about her favorite adaptation, which had George C. Scott as Ebenezer, and neither my mother nor I had heard of that one. I ended up searching Christmas Carol film adaptations just to see if there were any I had known about but forgotten, and I ended up finding a list that had, I swear, over 40 adaptations, and I don't even think it had all of them. And that's not even counting all the various novel adaptations, stage plays, and stage musicals that probably exist. Anyway, the song ends and the ghost of Christmas Past shows up. There's some flirting between her and Clint before Past shows back up in the afterlife, with it heavily implied that she and Clint slept together. Present is understandably upset by this and even tells Past, like, don't you understand the stakes of this scenario? Like, he's an unredeemable. And there's this really cute interaction between Past and Yet to Come where Past says, oh, he redeemed himself all right, and the two high five. So Present ends up taking over Clint's past, and this is where we get the parallels between Scrooge and Clint. Clint has an abusive mother, whereas Scrooge has an abusive father. There's a sister character that both adore, who ultimately dies, leaving behind a young child for someone to care for, and there was a girlfriend that left them because of how self-centered they are. If it feels like I'm breezing through this, it's because I am. Spirited isn't trying to rehash A Christmas Carol for the 80th time, so what are major emotional focal points and story beats of the original story aren't the main focus of this movie, which I'm personally fine with because nobody's going to do it as good as the Muppets. Present then takes Clint to a memory called a kicker, which is a big, emotional, impactful memory that must be faced before any real change can happen. Clint's kicker is visiting his sister in the hospital as she is dying. We don't ever get any specifics on what she's suffering from, but it is heavily implied to be some form of cancer. Clint, not ready to face his kicker, runs away and ends up escaping the haunt into the afterlife where he is chased around and ultimately cornered in Present's office by Present. It's in Present's office where Clint learns he's an unredeemable, and finally, after Clint has been spending almost the entire movie pestering Present about like who he is, how long has he been dead for, blah blah blah, we finally get the reveal of Present's past. Present was Scrooge. I'm not gonna lie, I called this twist like the first 5 minutes into the movie. Scrooge was the only ever unredeemable to go through the program. In Present's past, we get an amazing song called Good Afternoon, and Marley shows up, forcing Clint back to bed and telling Present that he must stay on script. Clint wakes up on Christmas Eve, where he has a Christmas party in full swing in his apartment. And this is also where we get Clint in the red suit that we see in all of the trailers and screenshots of the film. He's supposed to be Santa because this is a costume Christmas party. Present shows up dressed in his traditional green robes and the like laurel wreath on his head. He's on his giant pile of food, all come in and know me better man, and Clint calls him out on this because before they had been connecting, but now Present's really withdrawn and pull away, even calling him a perp again because Present has to stay on script. Present is able to take Clint around to his present, and they have this really cute scene of them jumping through the different buildings of New York City, only to end up back in the apartment that they just left, but now nobody can see them. At the Christmas party, Clint hears how everybody is calling him a jerk because he's having a Christmas party on Christmas Eve, and Kimberly is there, and Kimberly and Present get to talk some more. Clint pulls Present away from Kimberly, and so we go to the skating park where we see Ren post the video, to the homeless shelter, where Josh is working on Christmas Eve, and then to the ex-girlfriend's house where we see she is happily married. Here we get a reprise of Story of Your Life, where Clint points out these aren't things that he wants, but what Present wants. Present ends up getting Clint to face his kicker again, where we learn that Wendy on her deathbed had actually asked Clint to take care of and raise Wren once she was gone. And instead, Clint pushed that responsibility off onto his younger brother, Owen. It's directly after he faces his kicker that Present says that his part of the haunt is done and that the next ghost will be with him soon and tries to leave, but Clint gets upset. He says Present can't just leave after forcing him to face the past that he had been running from when he himself is running from his own past and his fears of being unredeemable. Marley shows up again to try and halt the haunt once more and force Clint back to bed, but Present stops this, and we get the 11th hour number, Unredeemable. This is the best song in the entire movie. We're gonna put a big pin in this, because if I stopped for every single thing that I loved in this movie, and Unredeemable being one of the biggest, I would never get through this summary. It's during this song that Present finally accepts his retirement package, and he wakes up with Clint in bed, returned to humanity. Present ends up going on a date with Kimberly just to walk down the river, and we get a reprise to View from Here, and Clint goes off with the ghost of yet to come. Clint is shown his future with the ghost of yet to come, and he is completely unfazed by everything he sees until he gets to Wren. Wren, having posted the video of Josh, ends up winning the class presidency and is in the middle of a meeting when all of the students get a notification on their phone. Josh, in response to all of the hatred he got for the video, takes his own life. Clint, disturbed by this future, tries to run again to escape the haunt to stop this from happening. He's caught by past and yet to come in the future graveyard, and yet to come, completely fed up with Clint, throws him out of the haunt and back to Earth. Clint wakes up and immediately runs with Present to the ice rink to stop Wren from posting the video. They get to the rink, they're running out of time, and Kimberly stops them to tell Clint that she should have done this a long time ago and quits her job on the spot. She's about to go into a reprise to View from Here before Clint interrupts her, upset thinking they've missed their window to stop Wren from posting the video, only for Kimberly and Wren to reveal that she didn't post the video. Kimberly told Wren that it's her actions that make her who she are, and it's with this revelation that Wren doesn't post the video. Present is so excited he thinks Clint's redeemed, and he excitedly waits for the ghosts to stop time and arrive to tell Clint that he's redeemed, except the ghosts never arrive. And Clint confesses to Present that outside of this one exception, he's gonna go to work the next days and still be the exact same guy. Present is understandably upset by this, because if Clint can't be redeemed, then how can he? He runs away from the ice rink and throws himself in front of a bus, only for Clint to save him at the last minute, finally redeeming himself and stopping time. We get our finale song, Do a Little Good, and at the end, time starts up again, and Clint is run over by the bus, instantly killed. We fast forward a couple of years, and we see now that Clint is the ghost of Christmas Present, and he is married to Past, and Present, now called Roberto in a callback to an earlier joke, is married to Kimberly, and they have 2 kids. Roll credits. It's the 23rd. There's absolutely no way I'm getting this out in time. But I can get it out before New Year's, and that still counts. I'm now going to get into some character specifics that I noticed or liked or didn't like, as previously stated, but by character specific I mean ghost specifics, because I did not have a lot of thoughts on Clint or Kimberly. Sorry. I'm going to start with the Ghost of Christmas Past, and the first thing I just want to say is, what is going on with her costume? Costume designers of Spirited, turn on your location. I have so many questions for you. So her ghost costume is this weird windbreaker with a pajama shirt, but I don't think she has pants on, and if they are, they're too short. They're hidden by the pajama pants, and she has these little heeled booties that are honestly on their own really cute, but altogether it's just a very confusing ensemble. I had initially thought that this was a modern interpretation of the Ghost of Christmas Past, until we get to the Ghost of Christmas Present after he's on script, and he's wearing the traditional green robes and laurel wreath that every Ghost of Christmas Present has to wear, so I don't know what's going on. The only justification for her costume that I can come up with is that it's sexy, so Clint is into her when he first sees her, but I'm not gonna assume that's the entire reason behind her outfit. I didn't major in costume design, but as part of my theater degree, I did have to take a costuming course, and I did design my own set of costumes. I believe it was for Taming of the Shrew, so we had to design costumes for Kate, her fiance, her sister, her father, and I think 1 or 2 servants. This is all just to say that I know you don't just throw things to the wall and see what sticks. Well, I guess you could, but for the most part, costume design has intention and decision and a lot of thought and reason behind it. For example, I know everyone talks about how bad Belle's dress was in the live-action adaptation that Disney did for Beauty and the Beast, but that dress was designed to specifically look a certain way when it moved. Timon's puppeteer in the Broadway adaptation of The Lion King is dressed and painted in completely green so that the puppeteer blends in with the plant and greenery in the background, and Timon the puppet stands out a lot more. Whether or not that one is executed well is another question. If you want to do a modern look for your characters, that's fine, but at least commit to the modern aesthetic for all of your characters. And what makes it even worse is that she has this beautiful red dress that she wears when she's doing different research and scenes in the afterlife. Why didn't she wear that? What's going on? Okay, so Past's costume is just like the biggest thing I have to say about her, because if you couldn't tell already, Past and Yet to Come aren't majorly featured ghosts. Like, they're a big deal, don't get me wrong, but Present and Clint are kind of like the movie. With all that being said, there is a scene between Clint and Present where Present gets on, he has a little headset that he uses to communicate with the inner workings of the afterlife, and Past asks Present to smell his hair and tell her what it smells like, and he does it and says that it smells like cotton candy, and I thought that was really cute. Moving on to the Ghost of Christmas Present, I do have questions about what's going on with his costume situation as well, because he has like 3 or 4 different costumes that he wears. He has his standard work clothes that all of the ghosts in the afterlife wear, but he has 2 variations of this. He has the suit jacket that we see in a lot of screenshots and parts of the trailer as well, but he also has a puffer coat variation of this outfit, and then he also has his traditional green robes that he wears as well. I, like for the Ghost of Christmas Past, thought that his work suit was another modern interpretation of the Ghost of Christmas Present, but no, he has the green robes that he wears. So Present's major storyline is that he wants to be human again because when he was Scrooge and he was redeemed, he died 3 weeks after being redeemed. So he's forever living with this question of, was he truly redeemed or is he just the same old mean guy? I do think this is a really fun storyline because there are a lot of little moments and tiny character beats that they run with for this. For example, when he's in the Hall of the Redeemed, he has this little hologram he's holding up when he's thinking about what it would be like to be human in the 21st century. He says it would be exciting to try one of those newfangled mouth kisses. And this is something that does make me laugh every time, but it's just like a very nice little detail to point out that and it's also, I guess, a hint to him being Ebenezer Scrooge, but that's besides the point. It's just this very nice detail to point out the fact that he died a long time ago, so the culture that he is familiar with and knows is completely and wildly different than the current one. Another is that when Present is human again, he feels the effects of gravity, and so Will Ferrell has like this waddle that he does around as he's trying to get used to gravity. He keeps walking into doors because he previously used to just be able to walk through them. He wakes up beside Clint in a cap and gown, and I thought that was a really nice touch because that's what he also is very excited about indoor plumbing, and he asks Clint if he can shower, I think either once a week or once a month, and he thinks this is just the greatest thing ever. It's a lot of nice little details that they didn't have to do or pay attention to, but it does add a lot of comedic interest and just overall goodness to the movie. When Present is human again, he does get to the costume party because they wake up and it's Christmas Eve and the Christmas party is happening at Clint's house. So he goes downstairs and there's a guy dressed in the elf costume that he calls stupid. And I think this is very funny because, you know, it's a nod to Will Ferrell's other big famous Christmas movie, Elf. But I am here to set the record straight. This costume is from Rudolph. It is not from Elf. Now I know what you're thinking. Kay, it's the costume from Elf, Will Ferrell's other wildly successful Christmas movie, and I hear you, but I will counter with this. The costume designer of Elf has said that the costumes for the elves were inspired by or based on the iconic look of the elves from Rudolph, and you're thinking, no, Kay, those outfits were blue and pink. This is green. It's from Elf. Wrong. There was one elf before Buddy who wore the iconic green suit. Unlike you, I went to elf practice. Another moment that I thought was really cute and funny is when Clint finally wakes up from his haunting and he's trying to get to the roller rink. Present is sitting in a armchair, like covered in a blanket, and he's watching infomercials, and as Clint is running around trying to get dressed so he can leave, Present says, "I think I have moderate to severe Crohn's disease," and Clint yells, "No, you don't!" And it's just very funny. I laugh every single time. Ghost of Christmas Yet to Come is my favorite of the 3 ghosts. I do like this interpretation of him, but he is not my favorite. Muppets wins that one again. Maybe one year I'll do a ranking of all of the ghosts of Christmas Yet to Come because they are not all made equal. Yet to Come does get to talk in the afterlife, and I appreciate that there's no exciting build up to like, oh, what does he sound like? He just talks. And I laugh every single time he talks because that's never a voice that you're expecting from the ghost. I do think any voice that wasn't monstrous or inhuman would have been equally as funny, because I just like the thought of the ghost as being just some guy. But I do enjoy Tracy Morgan's performance as the ghost. My very first thought during the movie was about the Ghost of Christmas Yet to Come, and I said word for word, he points so good, and it made my sister laugh so loud because there is this through line for the Ghost of Christmas Yet to Come about how he doesn't want to be the ghost that points at things anymore, and he wishes he could talk during his haunt, and every year he tries, but nothing comes out. But he does have a really good point. And the point's actually like a really hard thing to do, because you really got to be, like, you have to have a loose hand, but you have to have intention behind it. You can't be pointed too downward because that just, like, that doesn't look right. But you can't have your fingers too loose because then you're not pointing at all. But so, yeah, you gotta have a very nice, let me see. You're just kind of like resting on the air as you point. But you're not, it's not an angry point. You're not, very loose and flowing. The point just kind of comes. But then it gets even better because his through line of wanting to talk comes true. He gets to talk in the haunt. He has this humongous roar that's animalistic and monstrous right before he talks, and I love it. You know, like, it's one of those yells that, like, you know, when you're so full of emotion, like good or bad or negative, and you just kind of, like, have to scream? That's what he's doing. It's great. It's just a yell of emotion, and then he talks! You've been Christmas caroled, bitch! Jacob Marley. Jacob Marley is also another ghost that I really enjoy during this. I don't know what it is about him. I don't know if it's the way he's been written. I don't know if it's the actor. I just very much enjoy Jacob Marley as a ghost. And I'm very excited. I was so excited when I started watching this because I had been hit like a week before with the thought that, you know, like, we paint Jacob Marley and Scrooge as these people who do not care about anyone but themselves. And I'd had this thought, you know, that, like, the reason, like, I think I was actually watching Bill Murray's Scrooge. But the whole reason Marley comes back from the afterlife to warn Scrooge is because he does care about Scrooge. And I was so happy to see that Spirited also runs with this idea and interpretation because Scrooge and Marley are friends in the afterlife. Jacob's character, though, does give me a lot of questions about how the internal workings of the afterlife are. The movie implies that this redemption process has been going on a lot longer than Marley and Scrooge. It does make me wonder then, who was the ghost before Marley? Did this whole thing just start with Marley? Did he truly get to the afterlife covered in these chains and he was like, I gotta find some sort of purpose, and that's how it came about? I don't know. I want to know. And another thing is that he's been at this almost as long as Present has, actually technically longer than Present has. Why doesn't Marley retire? Is Marley just satisfied with being a ghost and scaring the crap out of people? Okay, I'm now going to break down into a whole section about the songs because there's just a lot. There's just a lot to talk about. Yeah. So I have a very important question to raise. It's established within the very first 5 minutes of the movie that all of the singing, dancing, musical stuff that happens is diegetic in the afterlife. So what is happening in the real world then? Because it's never established until basically at the end of the movie that is diegetic. And I remember having this distinct moment when Clint was singing his song in the real world of being like, is this real? Is this an actual song happening? What's going on? Do the ghosts just hallucinate musical scenes? And like I said, it's later established at the very end of the movie when Kimberly's about to go and do her reprise. Maybe it's established earlier than that. But whatever. Clint says that she's killing it, so he hates to interrupt it. But that proves that all of the singing and dancing happening earlier was real. I will say I do think that this points to a larger issue with movie musicals and their need to justify themselves. You don't. I think it stems from this idea of theater versus film and the suspension of disbelief, and where film is selling the idea that something is real and more natural, whereas theater isn't. When I watch a movie and the characters are walking down a street, the implication is that that's a real street. Even if it's a set and I can see it's a set, I can suspend my disbelief and believe that it's a real street, versus I go to the theater and the street is maybe represented by something as simple as a lamppost. I know that's not a real street. The show isn't trying to tell me it's a real street. Street either. And while I do think this idea of theater versus film was true at the very start of these two mediums, and is even still true today, I also think there are times where it's very untrue. When I'm sitting in the theater watching the 80th Marvel movie that's come out this year, I don't think what's happening on that screen is entirely real. And at the rate their CGI and special effects are failing, I don't think anybody else is going to believe it either. Characters doing complex acrobatics, fight scenes, and other stunts are switched out with stunt doubles, or intense details like explosions right in somebody's face might be added in post. I go to see Phantom of the Opera on stage, and those are trained dancers doing ballet. Those are pyrotechnics that are happening and can catch somebody on fire. So if you're telling me the reason live action movie musicals don't do well is because people can't believe that people would start singing and dancing just because, and thus need to justify their internal logic through random quips and throwaway lines, then you're wrong. Also, it's a Christmas movie. Of all of the movie genres that don't need any reason to be a musical, it's a Christmas movie. Okay, I got very passionate about that, so I'm gonna just keep going. Bringing Back Christmas is one of the first instances of stopping the song in this movie. It becomes a bigger problem with songs later, but first let me explain what I mean by stopping the song. Cats 2019 is a really good example of this, especially with the song Rum Tum Tugger. You have Jason Derulo as Tugger, and then you have Rebel Wilson there as the Gumby Cat, and so Jason Derulo will be singing sections of Rum Tum Tugger, and we'll just cut away to... I forgot who it was. Rebel Wilson. We'll cut away to Rebel Wilson cracking some sort of improv joke or throwaway line or blah, 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 blah. Effectively stopping the energy of the song completely because we're just stopping the song. Stopping the song has been like a thing for centuries, but there are correct ways and incorrect ways to do it. Cats 2019 being a really good example of incorrect ways. In this instance, stopping the song is done in more of the style of Chicago, the movie, because I haven't seen the stage show, where the scene is a continuation of the song and it's not necessarily a hard stop. I'll say it. Old movie musicals would just have a 5-minute dance break whenever they needed to change up a song. Bring it back, cowards. Okay, I'm going to unpin one of the pins we had earlier because we're at Marley's Haunting or Story of Your Life. So I said earlier that I find the interpretation of Marley's Haunting in this movie to just be really weird. The original haunting has Scrooge eating in a dark room by a dim fire when all of the bells start ringing. So I'm editing and I got to this part of the video and I started reading a little excerpt from the original Christmas Carol, and I just felt that I really wanted to do this whole scene justice before I really started to sort of dissect it. So I'm going to reread it, and I'm going to read more of it so we really get like the whole picture of what's happening in this original scene before we talk about Spirited's interpretation of a haunt. As he threw back his head in the chair, his glance happened to rest upon a bell, a disused bell that hung in the room and communicated for some purpose now forgotten with a chamber in the highest story of the building. It was with great astonishment and with a strange inexplicable dread that as he looked, he saw this bell begin to swing. It swung so softly in the outset that it scarcely made a sound, but soon it rang out loudly, and so did every bell in the house. This might have lasted half a minute, or a minute, but it seemed an hour. The bells ceased as they had begun, together. They were succeeded by a clanking noise, deep down below, as if some person were dragging a heavy chain over the casks in the wine merchant's cellar. Scrooge then remembered to have heard that ghosts in haunted houses were described as dragging chains. The cellar door flew open with a booming sound, and then he heard the noise much louder on the floors below, then coming up the stairs, then coming straight towards his door. "It's a humbug still," said Scrooge. "I won't believe it." His color changed, though, when, without a pause, it came on through the heavy door and passed into the room before his eyes. If I'm going to do a half-hearted analysis of this scene in the book, The Haunting was designed around the society of the time. Ebenezer is so cheap and has so little staff that the entire purpose of each bell is completely forgotten because they're so unused. And he's completely alone because he's eating a hunk of bread and cheese for dinner. Suddenly, one bell starts moving slowly. Who is here? Who could be using this bell? The bell starts ringing faster and faster, and all of the other bells in the house are ringing now too. Oh my God, what is going on? You've gone to complete silence, to an overwhelming cacophony of noise. It is literally the modern day equivalent of being awake and alone at 2 a.m. in your kitchen, and then your doorbell just starts ringing nonstop. The modern haunting has a picture float and start ringing, and then a vase floats and rings, and then a row of lights swing cartoonishly back and forth and ring before seemingly the entirety of New York City has a blackout. I know it's supposed to be cheesy and fun, but I had been really excited to see how they were going to do the haunt in the 21st century and who was going to show up from Clint's past, and to see them just fall back on the original was really kind of disappointing, especially when the power outage was the coolest and creepiest part of the whole thing. Clint's in an apartment. Maybe he has some sort of buzzer or a doorbell system, and Marley spookily says his name over the intercom. Lights start flickering, and maybe some fog rolls in through under the doors, and maybe some footsteps announce Marley's approach. Then, to keep the power outage theme, all of the lights in his apartment suddenly overload, becoming brighter and brighter until they explode one by one, and a sweeping blackout takes over New York City. I also think having Marley haunt every single person after Scrooge is a really weird choice, because Marley was so important that he was one, if not the only person that Ebenezer looked up to. So to have this person that you thought was great because he was like you, the person that you hold greatest, comes back telling you about all the horrors he must face for the actions of his life, that's huge. The weirdness of this haunting is even further reinforced when at the end of the movie, Clint's sister appears to lead him into the afterlife. Again, I know it was supposed to just be cheesy and fun, but I just think it could have been cool. But anyway, that's just the haunting itself. Let's get to the song, Story of Your Life. And it is the best song. And they keep stopping it for jokes. He doesn't even finish his song because there are so many jokes made that Marley gets fed up and left. It is a crime to deprive us of this song. If you go to the YouTube video of this song, literally all of the comments are just talking about how everybody demands that they release a full version of this song. But yeah, Story of Your Life, despite being my absolute favorite song outside of Unredeemable, maybe even with Unredeemable, is the biggest defender of stopping the song for joke, because the song literally stops. Like, the lighting changes, the music stops, they have conversation, and the music and lighting pick up again, and then stop, and then start, and then stop. In my opinion, it would have been a lot stronger to have Marley sing his song, only for him to finish, and then have Ryan Reynolds make the joke that he doesn't care. And then you get to the end of Marley's song, and this is just something I weirdly noticed. I don't know if it's a good or a bad thing. Maybe it's a bad thing. But so Marley's song ends at the 40-minute mark, and we don't get another song in until about an hour and 5 minutes, which is about 25-30 minutes without a song. And I know that doesn't sound like a lot, but that's a lot of time to not have a song when up until this point you've had a song about every 10 or so minutes. And you don't really notice it until the next song happens, but I will say when I was watching it for the first time, it definitely hit me in the face that, oh, this is a musical. When was the last time we had a song? I think I even said to my sister, oh yeah, this is a musical. I think this could have been helped a little bit if there was another song somewhere in Clint's past. Maybe in his kicker and it gets interrupted because he storms out only for us to finish it in the 11th hour. It could have even been like a sort of theme or motif or something for Clint's character. So after 30 minutes without a song, we start back up again with Good Afternoon, and I think this is a fantastic song to start back up again on. I can't say it for any other reason other than it's just high energy and silly, and it's great. It's a big dancey song. I love it. I like that Clint's character is a corrupting force during this song that's saying, yeah, maybe Present is a nice guy, but he's still got a little bit of a jerk in him. I don't think I explained this, but the reason this song is funny is because Good Afternoon is explained to us as having been a swear word in this time. So they're going around saying good afternoon to everyone, which the audience has been explicitly told is the equivalent of saying F you. Which is just another really good bit poking fun at how, at least in Western society, we've had some really weird customs in our past that now seem weird and ridiculous in the context of modern day. After Good Afternoon is Unredeemable, and this is one of my favorite 11th hour songs of all time. The visual beauty that this scene has gives me chills every single time I watch it. There's this insane contrast of dark and light, culminating in these dancers performing an intense, energetic dance in near darkness with the only clear visual being the lights that they have on their sleeves. And Will Ferrell. If this was a stage show and it was performed almost exactly like it was in the movies, the audience would be losing their mind. Like, I cannot describe the primal need I feel to scream and cheer and cry every time this song ends because it's the emotional climax of Present's story. Ebenezer died 3 weeks after being redeemed, and he has spent the past 200 years wondering if he really did change or if he was the same nasty, evil man that he was for his entire life. The pieces fall into place. If Clint can be redeemed, then so can he. Finally, he will be human and he will know if he is redeemed. Which is why it's so upsetting when Clint isn't redeemed, because if Clint can't change, then how can he? Though I do want to know if the people there are the ghosts from the afterlife or just the shadows of his past. We do see the actual ghosts there in the same costumes as the possible shadows, but also Kimberly's there. My final song note is The View from Here secondary reprise when Kimberly is at the roller rink and she gets interrupted by Clint, and my only note is, let Octavia Spencer sing! Let her sing! The Santa hat is absolutely way too tight on my head. Okay, so this is just kind of a collection of thoughts that I had that didn't really fit in any organizational way, presented without further comment. So I said at the start of the movie, the Scrooge character is getting pulled into the ground, and it's very cool and creepy, and I like this. I also like that it's a musical, and it is a musical that works really hard to show the dancing in it. Nothing drives me more insane than a musical that just doesn't show you the dance, especially for songs that are just giant dance numbers. Dancing adds so much energy and excitement to the music, and different dances add different energy. Just think about any song that suddenly starts breaking into a tap number. The energy of the song before the tap number and after the tap number is completely different. Speaking of tap, we do get a tap montage, and I was really excited about it. I even wrote it in my notes. I liked it so much I wrote it twice. So we have an HR ghost. She does not have a name. I'm just calling her the HR ghost. And she tells Present at one point, God, I miss drinking. I think she's talking to him about retiring. And this raises several questions for me. The ghosts eat, as established by the chili of positive outcome, and also we see them eating the chili of positive outcome, but can they not drink? But then the ghosts are seen drinking coffee, and again, eating the chili of positive outcome, so do they just eat for fun? Do they not actually feel anything when they eat and drink? I can only assume that they don't feel anything when they eat, or at the very least when they drink, because I'm assuming that she misses the sensation of being drunk. And Bringing Back Christmas is a random close cut to Clint's face when he says fake plastic trees, and I thought it was going to be a zoom in on each word, like fake plastic tree, but it didn't do that. It was just the one closer cut, so I wonder if something happened with the take or if there was something in the shot that they didn't like. It was a very intentional cut, but again, it didn't go anywhere. Kimberly gets her own little mention because I did like Kimberly, not just as a romantic interest for Present or as a somewhat Bob Cratchit character, but as a foil to Scrooge. Kimberly is Scrooge in that she has money and the power, but she also has a conscience. And something about Kimberly I noticed but wish was talked about in context of the scene is when past Clint tells Kimberly to come with him. Clint is leaving the company after he's been reprimanded for creating a fake scandal, and Kimberly's boss gives her permission to leave. The camera clearly cuts to him nodding to her, and it's only after she sees this that she agrees to go with him. There's this underlying story beat that mankind isn't getting any mankinder. That's actually a quote word for word from Clint. And I think it's supposed to tie into Present's fears that he himself has never changed from the Scrooge he was, but it just doesn't really land for me as a narrative. I'm just not a fan of story beats in general that are about how the world is continually getting worse, because while there are a lot of terrible, awful, cruel things that have happened, are happening, and will continue to happen, there is also a lot of good in the world that has happened, is happening, and will continue to happen. For example, you and me are in the world right now, and I think that's a wonderful thing. And then speaking of Present, I don't know if it's an intentional thing, but I do enjoy that Present keeps his mean streak. And I don't mean that, oh, he's Scrooge and he's still mean. Although he does quote at the end of the movie, sorry, the mean guy does come out. But I do mean it in that it was a defining trait of the Ghost of Christmas Present, and that he was able to be blunt, rude, and harsh with Ebenezer. There's Scrooge's line from the original Christmas Carol about there being no prisons or workhouses to take in the poor and needy that is thrown back in his face by the ghost. Scrooge says that it's better for these people to die to decrease the surplus population, and the ghost says this to Scrooge as he worries for Tiny Tim. And do I even need to talk about the wanton ignorance scene? Present even gets to be kind of rude and harsh and blunt with Clint a couple of times, so that's what I mean by that. It keeps coming back. When the Ghost of Christmas Yet to Come is here to take Clint onto the final part of his haunting, there's a really good bit where Clint keeps trying to see if he's here for somebody else or trying to get him to take somebody else, and I like that. That was funny. One thing that I was handled really well is Tiny Tim in this movie. And what I mean by that is Present completely forgets about Tiny Tim. He runs through a number of names as he tries to remember who this kid was. My favorites are Micro Michael and Itsy Bitsy Isaac. And I just think having arguably the greatest emotional core of the story just be something that he completely forgets about is the absolute funniest way you could have handled that. And so that's it. Those are all of the thoughts and feelings that I had on 2022's Spirited. It's a great movie. I just think everyone should watch it. I just want to add, if I had 2 nickels for every time I saw a Christmas movie where Will Ferrell was naked in a shower, I'd have 2 nickels. But it's very weird that it's happened twice.